What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today's reaction video is USA and India versus China and Russia. We've done a few of these, haven't we?
Yeah, a few comparisons.
We haven't done this specific one. I think we know the outcome.
I think we do. Yeah.
I feel like USA, India probably has the numbers over China, Russia, because obviously USA is better than them, aren't they?
Yeah.
And I feel like India's just going to top USA over the edge.
Okay, just help them.
I think so. What do you reckon?
I mean, I can't really. I'd like imagine a country winning when USA's on the opposite team.
Right, it's very true.
That makes sense.
It's hard to win against USA, isn't it? You guys do spend a lot and you are proper badass with it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's good logic. Let us know your predictions in the comments below if you haven't seen this video before. If you have, let us know your predictions anyway. Why not?
Why not?
Just don't tell us you've seen it before so people don't know in the comments already. You get me?
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah. Smart. What is the like goal for today?
2,000.
2,000. Smash that button. Smash that subscribe button as well. We'd seriously appreciate that. That goes a long way. Just double check as well. If you think you're subscribed, just double check you are subscribed.
It's probably not.
Because sometimes you're not, and also sometimes it just YouTube just unsubscribes sometimes. So double check. We'd really appreciate it. It does, yeah. So just double check.
Yeah, double check because you're not.
You're not. Well, you might be.
No, you're not.
You're not.
Because I know.
Subscribe.
I know most of you are not.
There you go. Let's go. USA and India versus China and Russia. That was such a random intro, but let's go.
US and Russia, China and India. Two separate long-term rivalries and two flashpoints for global war.
India's very
but what if
isolated.
China and Russia decided to set aside their differences and join against an Indian-American alliance?
It is.
Who would win and how would that war play out? The rules of this war game are, as usual, no use of nuclear weapons allowed and no other allies can be called upon. First, let's take a look at each contestant's military might and see what capabilities each would bring to the table. First up is India, the world's fourth most powerful military. With an active duty force of 1.4 million and a reservist force of 2.8 million, India can call upon a deep pool of manpower to prosecute any war. India also possesses a formidable air force with 590 fighter aircraft, 804 attack aircraft, and a huge fleet of surveillance and transport helicopters that numbers at 720. India, however, suffers from a lack of attack helicopters with only 15 in its inventory. This may prove to be a crippling deficiency in any attempt to combat a Chinese-Russian incursion over its mountainous northern and eastern borders. India does, however, maintain a force of 4,400 combat tanks, of which about half are modern or semi-modern T-90s and the indigenous Arjun main battle tank. India is also equipped with a staggering number of towed artillery, 4,100 pieces, meant to make it impossible for their Chinese rivals to penetrate Indian defenses across the mountain gaps of its northeastern border. Its naval forces include 1 aircraft carrier, 14 frigates, 11 destroyers, 22 corvettes, and 16 submarines, a sizable collection of naval hardware that its immediate threat, China, would be hard-pressed to defeat. Next up is China.
Okay, so it seems like it can defend itself against China. I think they're sound.
I think they're good. I don't think they're to be laughed at.
Yeah, add on the USA. Boom, sword.
Yeah.
I think this is a USA-India victory. It's looking that way anyway.
Yeah. China is the most populous nation on Earth and maintains an active duty force of 2.2 million with a reservist force of 510,000. With an air force totaling 1,125 fighter aircraft, 1,527 attack aircraft, and 281 attack helicopters, China has a serious advantage in the air over India. Yet China's pilots are undertrained compared to their Western counterparts and forced to fly under strict supervision from ground controllers, a huge liability in fast-paced modern air combat.
Oh, wow.
China also has a force of 7,700 tanks and 6,246 towed artillery, backed up by 2,000 self-propelled artillery, mostly ballistic missile launchers, which would pose a significant threat to Indian and American forces. On the sea, China maintains a significant force with 1 test aircraft carrier not rated for combat operations, 50 light frigates, 29 destroyers, 39 corvettes, and 73 submarines. While larger in number
What is that test for, man? Is that something which eventually is going to be combat ready?
Maybe.
Or is it something they've built to see if they can build them?
Yeah.
But
Before they make any more.
But they've kept expensive ones up, like guns and stuff off it. But then you kind of think it must cost a fortune to do the outer shell anyway.
Pretend.
So why don't you just give it a go? And if it fails, then we don't do any more.
Yeah.
Let us know in the comments. Maybe it will become an armed one
Maybe.
eventually. Let us know in the comments if what is the case, right? 'Cause I feel like you're just wasting money.
In Indian naval forces, China lacks the ability to maintain long-term logistical support for any deployed ships, meaning only a small number of them could operate far from China's shores for longer than a few weeks. Underpinning China's military might is also the fact that its military is severely affected by systemic corruption, so much so that China's own leadership doubts the ability of the Chinese military to fight and win a major war against a near-peer power such as India. On to Russia. Russia has the world's second most powerful military, with an active duty force of just over 1 million personnel and a reserve force of 2.5 million. With 818 fighter aircraft and 1,416 attack aircraft, Russia's air forces are formidable, but would be severely hampered in war by a lack of reconnaissance assets. As one Russian military analyst put it, we have long-range, sometimes precision-guided weapons, but we don't always know where the target is. On the ground, though, Russia maintains the world's largest tank fleet, numbering over 20,000. However, this figure should be taken with a grain of salt, as the number includes many thousands of Soviet-era tanks that have long been decommissioned and would need weeks to bring into service, and even once operational, would be decades behind in capability, firepower, and protection versus modern tanks. Russia's naval fleet...
we also have what's going on in the world at the moment.
Yeah.
A lot less of them about. And it kind of shows, well, I haven't really been following it too much recently, but it just showed how ineffective the tanks were and stuff like that because they were so old-fashioned. So that's definitely a valid point.
Yeah, definitely.
You can knock quite a few off them.
Yeah.
Fleet has severely atrophied since the collapse of the Soviet Union, but it still maintains 1 aircraft carrier, 9 frigates, 13 destroyers, 78 corvettes, and 62 submarines. Though Russian vessels are on the whole aging and plagued by maintenance issues, they are still armed with very modern and capable long-range missiles, making them a force to be feared. And finally, the world's chief military power, the United States of America. The US enters the conflict on India's side with an active duty force of 1.3 million personnel and 800,000 reserve personnel. With 1,962 fighter aircraft and 2,830 multi-role aircraft, the US has almost double the air power of Russia or China. Its naval aviation forces alone are on par with either nation. Its fleet of 973 attack helicopters...
Let's just compare that. India was smaller, but even China, I think China was 200 and something, wasn't it? So you're thinking...
Even the difference.
Nearly 4 times as much. It's like... it's ridiculous.
Ensure that ground offensives are well covered.
Nah, they've got no chance, have they?
And it is rare that an American infantryman finds himself without fire support. A proponent of blitzkrieg warfare, America also maintains a fleet of 5,900 tanks, almost all of them modern Abrams variants, and 39,000 armored fighting vehicles, giving its ground forces unparalleled mobility. While lagging behind in numbers, America's 950 self-propelled, 795 towed, and 1,200 rocket artillery platforms often feature smart, precision-guided munitions. In fact, of all the military...
We're the max 1 on the others. China had a test, Russia had 1. They were like, yeah, we got 20, you know, as you do.
in the world, the United States uses the most precision-guided munitions, featuring them on almost every combat platform and giving US forces incredible lethality. At the onset of war, Chinese and Indian border forces stationed across the length of the Himalayas would come into immediate conflict. While initial predisposition of forces favors the...
Sorry, I think we'll keep this in. But I had a mouth batting there, it's just fell back. Yeah, I think you jumped.
I actually think I've just...
You may have visibly seen Millie jump.
I've just made myself cough.
Yeah, that is where the Himalayas was.
That's where the Himalayas was.
Boom, straight down.
would come into immediate conflict. While initial predisposition of forces favors the Indian Army, the narrow roads and valleys of the mighty Himalayas would make anything but meager gains all but impossible. Artillery would devastate any sizable forces trying to move through mountain gaps, leaving most of the combat action to light infantry units supported by helicopters. With Chinese forces primarily stationed along its eastern coast, India would initially have the upper hand both in the air and on the ground. Only a few air bases on the Tibetan Plateau could support combat operations for the Chinese, while dozens of airfields on India's side could put all Indian planes within combat range of the front lines. It would take weeks for China to construct makeshift airfields and air bases, and then rebase the bulk of its air fleet to the Tibetan Plateau, during which time, despite more advanced Chinese aircraft, Indian forces would enjoy a degree of air superiority. Yet the mountainous terrain would make it difficult for India to exploit that air superiority, and it would be forced to try to use ground attack planes when it would be far more efficient to use attack helicopters, of which India, again, only has 15. Once China relocated its mobile ballistic missile launchers to its western military regions, however, India would face a withering barrage of ballistic missiles that it could do absolutely nothing to protect itself from. Airfields and military command and control nodes across northern and eastern India would be devastated, and India's Air Force would suddenly find it very difficult to maintain hard-won air superiority, giving China the time needed to rebase its own air forces. Yet this is where China would have to make a very difficult choice. If it moves its forces to counter the Indian threat, it will leave the Pacific front completely vulnerable to American attack. Caught between the literal rock of the Himalayas, swarming with Indian infantry, and the hard choice of leaving itself vulnerable to coastal raids by the American Navy, China may look to its Russian allies for a...
Okay, so that's where Russia's going. I was going to say, I was thinking, obviously it's saying India will have for the first few weeks dominance of the air. Surely the US can send a load of their attack helicopters over, surely? Is that not how it works? Yeah. Let us know in the comments, but by the time China have got to a stage where they're ready to attack, surely the US could have got a lot of supplies over. Do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
Because if they're going by sea over there, they don't need the attack helicopters as much, so they could send them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let us know in the comments. I feel like I should have created this video. I know nothing other than this, but I definitely should have created it. I'll probably completely wrong. Let us know in the comments.
Solution. Russia would need to carefully consider the strategic situation. Its Chinese allies desperately depend on the Pacific Ocean for trade, importing most of their oil via sea trade routes and with domestic reserves not yet ready to support long-term war. With the majority of China's trade and oil passing through the Indian Ocean, the Indian Navy is, as one analyst put it, poised on China's jugular and could easily cripple China with a naval blockade of Chinese shipping. America's Pacific forces are, on their own, also more than sufficient to cripple the Chinese economy with a trade blockade, and China's Navy could not hope to counter America on its own. Desperately needing to ensure the oil lifeline stays open for its ally, Russia would likely try to bolster its Pacific fleet with large elements of its northern fleet. Yet, depending on the time of year, the Arctic ice may not have melted enough to open up shipping lanes. Either way, whatever naval forces Russia could muster on the Pacific would be needed to aid the Chinese in fending off the American Navy. This would still not be enough to save the Chinese economy, however, as India's Navy would never have to leave home to stop all Chinese shipping in the Indian Ocean. With a very limited capability to support its own navy far from its shores, China could at best scrounge together a small battle group of destroyers and cruisers with perhaps a few nuclear submarines to try and break the Indian blockade. Yet with India operating so close to home shores, it could take advantage of shore-based air power and make quick work of any Chinese task force. In the end,
that is quite a big thing, isn't it?
It is.
You talk about your trade and your economy and stuff like that, and India not really, it doesn't really have to do much to be like, obviously you got to put a lot of ships there, haven't you?
Yeah.
But it don't have to do too much.
Not really, it's kind of just little friend, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Just throwing it out like, yeah, you got no chance China. So it's quite a big thing from India, even though, like I say, they're the fourth best, so in this, the worst technically military out of all of them.
Yeah.
That's quite a big power play they've got there.
Yeah, but they've got the US, haven't they? So they're
and then the US as well.
Bumped up.
So they bump them up anyway, but with that, it's like, all right, we'll play our part, US go and destroy them.
China could not hope to stand against naval blockades by both the US and India, even with reinforcements from the Russian Navy. This is China's glaring Achilles heel, its almost complete reliance on the sea for trade and oil, and why China has been ambitiously undergoing its modern Silk Road infrastructure development program with friendly nations, with very mixed success. Caught between the threat of raids on its Pacific coast by the US Navy and Indian forces pushing through the Himalayas, China would likely choose not to deploy its ballistic missiles to the west, as even if India managed to break out of the Himalayas, China's western territory is largely of little economic value. It would be far more prudent for China to try to keep America's carrier groups at bay with its DF-21 ballistic missiles, though China has still, to date, failed to show it has the capability to follow through on the threat of its ballistic missile forces by displaying a mastery of the various tracking, recon, and targeting systems and assets needed to go from launch to successful kill, or the ability to properly defend them from US attack. Okay. At best, the Sino-Russian alliance could hope to hold India at bay in the Himalayas and could likely even push India back once Chinese and Russian personnel created enough forward air bases on the Tibetan Plateau to support offensive operations. Yet Chinese and Russian forces would be limited to advancing only as far as the Indian foothills on the western edges of the Himalayas. The narrow passes and undeveloped roads through those passes would not make it possible to transport large amounts of hardware into India itself, while India could hold vast amounts of tanks and artillery on its plains, ready to crush any advance into Indian territory. In short, it would be guaranteed suicide to try to break out of the Himalayas for both the Chinese and Russian forces. Meanwhile, India and the US
that's kind of like the I'll go back just so we pick up that in a minute. But I guess that's kind of like with the Afghanistan, all the tight roads in there. Like, I've seen a few documentaries, and it's literally like you can't advance through certain mountains because there's just one road in and out.
Yeah.
Everyone's watching that one road. You try and take something expensive through there, everyone just goes on it. It's kind of similar to that. It's pretty much impossible.
Yeah.
Which is quite mental, the fact that with all the technology saying stuff like that, you still technically can't do it because it's just one road in and out.
It's crazy.
It is what it is. Geography plays a massive part.
Yeah, it does.
And kind of like with the ice caps thing, that was mental.
I know.
Like, you've got to wait to a certain time of year to be able to access that part of the sea, which is logical. It makes sense. But when you think about this, you don't really think about it.
No, you don't.
It's weird, isn't it?
It is weird. It is.
For both the Chinese and Russian forces. Meanwhile, India and the US could starve China into submission by devastating its economy through naval blockades. It would take weeks for the US to degrade Russia's and China's naval and air forces enough to attempt an amphibious assault against either nation, but the high casualties would make it a very unappealing proposition. Instead, the US could comfortably sit back and bottle the Russian fleet up while systematically destroying the Chinese fleet, leaving their Indian allies to continue denying China's desperately needed oil imports. A US-India and Russia-China war would end with very little territory gained or lost on either side, and with staggering amounts of casualties for Indian and Chinese forces. The US Navy would likely see significant casualties, but both Russia's and China's navies would be all but completely destroyed. China and India's economies would be devastated, but China's specifically could face a catastrophic collapse that could even lead to the end of its Communist Party's rule. Wow. With so much to lose and practically nothing to gain, neither side would ever seriously consider such a war, but if they did, China's inability to protect its sea trade routes would make one side the clear victor. If you want to be able to make videos like this one, but even better looking...
Well, there's another on there. If you want to go and check that out, the link is in the description. Russia didn't really play any part in it though, did it?
Not really, no.
Didn't really mention Russia too much. Obviously, it mentioned them with the Himalayas and helping hand there. But depending on the time of year, potentially could get to the US in there. But it didn't really do much.
No, not much, really.
It kind of seemed like the US were chilling. Obviously, they've spent a lot of money on this war, cost an absolute fortune, and they'll unfortunately lose casualties in it. But in terms of homeland, chilling miles away from it, just sending to help, and then Russia's kind of chilling as well.
Yeah, it's just
and
not
really helping.
in India, really, isn't it?
Yeah, to be fair, I wouldn't really. Would Russia be a trusty ally anyway?
I'm not saying anything on camera.
That is very true. Smash the I button, guys. I didn't say it. I just asked for questions. Smash the I button, guys. Smash the subscribe button. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Let us know if you enjoyed it as well. We'd seriously appreciate it. And watch the video.
Have a fantastic day.
And we'll see you, legends, in the next one. Peace.